Red light. Oh, look at that, we're charging. Good morning, Codger Biker here. Is it ever right to buy cheap, or will you buy twice? So a friend of mine spent 2 years developing a product, and he's just becoming successful with it when an exact copy of it from the Far East appeared in reputable shops for £100 less. So I always try to support the people that develop an idea. Also, YouTube friend of mine, Campbell01, hello Rob. A couple of years ago I think he bought a cheap, I think it was a radiator guard, and he had so many problems with it he turned it into a barbecue. So in my last video I moaned about the petrol filler cap. I hate this cap, real pain in the arse. And as I expected, lots of people, well, get the Vanache one, or the Vanache. Never much easier. I'd always intended to get one, but it was sort of way down the list. But the last time I went to the fuel station, I nearly snapped the key off. Right, it feels like you're going to snap the key off. You probably aren't going to, but it's just awkward and it's annoying. So anyway, I've changed it. But instead of getting the Vanache one, which all my experience would say, you know, pay a bit more, get the proper one by the people that have probably developed it, put time and effort into it. For some reason or other, and I don't know why, she must be obeyed, I decided to get one that was about half price. To be fair to it, when it arrived, it does look like it's billet aluminium as it claims, although that doesn't mean anything, does it? It's just a chunk of aluminium. I bought this, which is a replacement fuel cap for my 690. It's just a black one because I thought there was enough bling on it. And I removed the old cap quite easily, just 3 torque screws. First of all, I have to say I had absolutely no intention of videoing this because I'm not in the business of telling people what to do with fuel tanks, health and safety and all that, but here's the one that I took off. Here's the O-ring that fits in there. Didn't even have to take the rack off, although do be aware there is a breather pipe which you can see under the seat that has to be attached, which is easier if you take everything off, but had no problems getting it on. So I got it all in, took care to get myself a rag in a bag so that nothing could drop inside. The thing I'm going to use for this is a rag in a bag, because if a screw fell inside the tank, that would be an absolute nightmare trying to get that out, because the tank's the subframes. As it happened, nothing fell in, but you know, it might have. Anyway, I'm on my way now to see if getting fuel is any easier. However, although I think it's working fine, it wasn't straightforward. I took all of the old filler off. I had purchased a new O-ring, not needed because the O-ring on the OEM filler cap, perfectly reusable, you don't need one. And everything was going well until I put the 3 supplied screws in and tried to tighten them up, and guess what? They weren't long enough. How could they supply the wrong screws? Surely they've tested it, haven't they? Also, on the top of the cap there is a tether so that you don't drop the cap on the floor. If you put their screw into it, it went all the way down and locked it because it had been drilled out and tapped too far. I mean, surely they tested it. Anyway, I got around that problem by putting balls of tin foil in and gradually squashing those in until the screw would tighten up completely without coming out, and then I put a bit of Loctite on it. This being a cheap version, not surprising there are some issues in that this bolt goes all the way in and traps the lead, which needs to be able to turn. So I've just got some little bits of tin foil, very small, ball bearing size, dropped them inside and then tightened the nut down on it. Put 3 of those in there so far. Now, as it's compressed, in. Got just enough for that to spin on there. So I sorted that out, but the screws into the tank, now you've got to be careful with those inserts. Tim, hi Tim, if you're watching, Tim sent me some photographs of the inserts that hold in the airbox, and one of his had broken and come out. They were brass and not very strong, so you don't want to put too much stress on those things. So I could have squashed down the O-ring and just managed to get perhaps 1mm of the thread on the tank. That might have worked, but it would have been putting a lot of stress on a very small area of insert and probably would have pulled out. So I measured them and I got some 5mm long bolts, tightened them up, and it's all gone in. So let's go and see if it works. There's my fuel cap. Undo my fuel cap. Lay my fuel cap to one side. Brilliant. So it works well. They're the replacement screws I put in, and there's a tether. And fill up. Now you can see it's got a lip so dirt doesn't fall in there. Not that I had much problem with dirt falling there anyway, but... And we're filled to the top. Don't fill too far because there's a breather pipe there. And replace the cap. You notice I went for the black one rather than the blingy orange one. I didn't really want a blingy one. If I got the Venacci one, I'd have got the black one. I just prefer it. Enough orange on this bike. So yeah, all working really well now. So took a little modification, but my filler cap is working fine, it would seem. But would I repeat that? Would I buy a cheap version again? No. One, morally, I don't like this sort of acquiring what you might call intellectual property development, as in my friend's product, which he developed over 2 years, many hours of work, his own design, and then somebody else just comes along and reproduces it, shall we be polite, at the fraction of the cost. And then it would appear that the people who reproduced this filler cap hadn't even bothered to test it. I don't see how they could have tested it, because it didn't fit the bike. I could have sent it back, and perhaps I should have done, but once I'd taken the old filler cap off, I decided I actually wanted to sort it out because it annoyed me so much. So anyway, as I say, I replaced the bolts, modified the depth of thread simply on the tether, and all is working well. However, I will not in the future ever buy a cheap rip-off of anything. I'm quite ashamed of myself, because I'd just forgotten about it, to be honest. It was only when it didn't fit that it annoyed me. And anyway, it's not that cheap. It's cheaper, but it's not a cheap buy. It's still quite expensive for what it is. So you don't save that much money anyway, and I'm not fully confident that the damn thing will work as well as the proper one. Although, to be fair to it, the lid came off and has gone back on again, and it feels very solid. Billet aluminium, as I say. So there's not a lot going on in England at the moment. The leaves are falling, the weather is bloody freezing, but thankfully so far no mention of the lockdown word. Let's hope it stays that way. Codger Biker is cheap. I mean out.